right, fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. I'm hopeful you're watching on SIFTD and you are a Patreon patron. And Shane at Dinfire on Twitter needs the support to keep this going. He got no sleep. He schlepped all his stuff to my home so we could film this. And so please, if you can, support him. If you're watching on YouTube, the price of admission is follow me on Twitter, please, at Michael Pachter. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be your friend forever. I actually reply to people on Twitter, so at least you can have some pack loving directly. Our first question this week from Patreon from Suburban Samurai. I'm curious what you think EA paid Disney for the exclusive video game rights to the Star Wars IP. Isn't it a bad deal for Disney since it's now stuck waiting for EA to produce games? Would it be smarter to shop the IP around a different publisher so they can create a wider range of games across more genres? Considering Visceral's game was canceled, how likely is it that the EA Star Wars exclusivity is eventually renewed? Okay, lots of questions. So think about it from Disney's perspective. You don't license the Star Wars game because you're keenly interested in profits from games. You license the Star Wars game because you want some profit from the game. You want some brand awareness of the Star Wars brand in between Star Wars movies, and you want that to continue. So you notice the Star Wars game isn't Star Wars The Last Jedi or Star Wars Rogue One or Star Wars The Force Awakens. It's Battlefront. So it's not the same setting, it's not the same characters, it's not the same story. It's just supporting the concept. Just like Batman Arkham Asylum has nothing to do with any of the Batman movies. It just keeps consumers aware of the brand. Spider-Man games used to work that way as well. So Disney makes a ton of money on the Star Wars brand, selling movie tickets, obviously selling Star Wars merchandise, Star Wars TV shows, spin-offs, books. There's a ton of stuff going on in the Star Wars universe. Games is a piece of the pie. And so what matters more to Disney than the royalty that they collect is that the brand itself maintains its integrity. And by integrity, I mean that the characters are displayed correctly, that they behave the way that Star Wars characters behave, that laser lightsabers are the right color for the right characters that are using them, that the dialogue makes sense and kind of fits in the whole Star Wars universe, that the Imperial Trooper uniforms are correct. That matters to Disney a ton, because the most passionate Star Wars fans who buy the merchandise, buy the figurines, see the movie, read the books, watch the TV show, are the guys who are going to notice that. So integrity matters the most. So I've answered it kind of in the middle. The first part of your question is, how much do they get? Well, it used to be that licenses were somewhere between 7.5% and 15%, depending upon the intellectual property. So games like NBA tend to be on the low end of that, 7.5% to 10%. We used to see the studios get greedy. You remember back in the day, who made those games? Do you remember? THQ. May they rest in peace. Ask yourself why THQ doesn't exist any longer. And it's because Disney asked for more and more and more on the Pixar license, got 20%, made a string of movies like Wall-E, remember that one? That were just an absolute disaster and did nothing in the game. It was a dumb game. I mean, you really want to be a garbage robot in a game? Like, how fun. So, that THQ lost the license, and then in a panic, they signed up DreamWorks Animation, and they started making those dumb games. But, those games ended up being really high royalty, and the publishers didn't make any money. And what happens on the royalty is, and this is just the typical economics of a game, when you make a game, you budget R&D. You budget around 20% of expected sales. But let's be real. I mean, a studio with 200 people, call it $100,000 a person for salary and benefits and occupancy. That ends up costing you $20 million a year. And on these games, maybe 2 years of development, so $40 million. And you're budgeting 20%. If you're not going to sell $200 million worth of the game, you're not making back your R&D. That's the problem. Marketing, 12 to 15%. So even say 12 and a half. You can't really spend much more marketing or you're not going to make back your investment. Then layer a royalty of 15% or 20% on there, and you're losing money unless you sell like 5 or 6 or 7 million of the game. So it's really hard to justify a licensed property. And what the publishers did back in the 2000s is they would sacrifice quality and they would sacrifice marketing. So instead of spending 20% of revenue, they'd spend 10. Instead of spending 12 to 15% on marketing, they'd spend 6. And we saw games flop. And of course, the studios didn't participate very well because they made content like Pixar, like Up and Wall-E, that just were not good game material. So Star Wars happens to be great game material. And Star Wars has really good production values, but Disney is hyper that the game is good. The Star Wars contract, I guarantee it, causes EA to commit to a certain production budget, gives Disney the right to approve art. So by the time it's all over, EA's got a lot of hoops to jump through. So when you ask, would they consider working with other publishers? That is tedious. And once they figure out, Disney, that EA is trustworthy and actually is professional and does a phenomenal job with the content. And again, I don't know what you thought of Star Wars Battlefront. I can tell you, low Metacritic scores notwithstanding, it looked good. I mean, the Metacritic scores, no one said, oh, I hated it because Darth Vader was too skinny or too short or too tall or because his lightsaber was the wrong color or whatever. That didn't happen. So they got all the parts that support the IP right. I mean, the gameplay was funky. It was multiplayer only. There were lots of things why Metacritic scores were low. Disney cares more about the Star Wars movie doing big box office because that's the basis for what they call the film ultimate. All the other revenue that comes from that brand comes because the movie, if the movie does $1 billion, then all the other revenue is going to be X. If the movie does $2 billion, all the other revenue is going to be 2X. So they care more about the movie than anything else, and they don't want anything taken away from the movie. So they would rather work with one guy on games and make sure it's right. EA was getting onto a path where they were going to have a Star Wars game every year. That's nirvana for the brand. You want that brand always in consumers' minds. And that was kind of what was going on with Spider-Man for a while. That you had a Spider-Man game every year, and you were going to get Batman games every year. You want to keep consumers thinking about the brand because it makes them look forward to the next movie, and it keeps profits at the studio consistent, throughout. So 12.5 would be my guess. If I'm wrong, it's 15. It's not any higher than that. They're going to renew as long as the Star Wars games do well. Our next question from SIFTD, from Rocky Fella. With major publishers spending more on game development than even a few years ago, how many failed releases would it take for one of the big game publishers like Activision or EA to have to downsize or close altogether? I mean, never say never. It's kind of a silly question because if you look at what the bread and butter is at Activision and EA, Activision's bread and butter is Blizzard. I can count all the Blizzard flops on one finger of one hand, and flop is a mean term. Heroes of the Storm. I mean, it's not even a flop. I guarantee that thing's profitable. But that's the only thing that Blizzard has ever made, ever, that hasn't been wildly successful. So you got this studio that does World of Warcraft before that Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, Hearthstone, Overwatch. I mean, tell me when those are going away, because the answer is never. And if one goes away, there'll be a new one to replace it. So, what happens when we get Warcraft Mobile? Oh my God, forget it. That's a revenue stream forever. The rest of Activision, King, yeah, it could go away. Not overnight. It will fade into oblivion slowly. And you probably didn't notice this because you don't follow Activision financials. King revenues were up 10% sequentially. So King's not going away. I mean, whatever they're doing it right. So nope, I don't see any chance that Activision messes up and has to downsize or close altogether. Now let's move over to EA. Sports. When are they going away? When are you going to stop caring about FIFA? Well, the answer is never. So as long as they have the FIFA exclusive license, and as long as they make a pretty good game, what are the odds that they're going to screw up a sports simulation game? I mean, it's possible. They did it with NBA, so it's possible. No one else is getting that FIFA license, so no, that isn't going away. When is Titanfall going to be terrible? Never. Battlefield? Probably not. You never know. So I'd say because of the recurring revenue from evergreen franchises like Battlefield, FIFA, Star Wars, EA's never going away either. So the answer is half of them. You'd have to screw up half your projects. And I mean, the crazy thing is, EA is a better example than Activision. Look what happened to Need for Speed. Okay, they've made 2 or 3 bad ones in a row, and they even took a year off last time because the game was bad to get it better, and this new one's not good. Look what happened to NBA. But EA has screwed up franchises, but not enough for their earnings to even go down. I mean, the last time they had a dip in earnings was like 2009 or 10. They've been on the upswing on earnings since 2009 or 10. They're like 8 years in a row of growth. So it would take a massive screw up, and the screw up would have to be a core franchise like FIFA. Activision, you would have to have Blizzard just have a complete meltdown. I mean, Blizzard is a freaking machine. Okay, our next question comes from Patreon from Guilherme Sena. Do you agree with the notion that games should stay copyrighted forever? Or do you think at some point in the future, maybe far future, some should eventually become public domain? I'm pretty sure a copyright is like the author's life plus some number of years, like 50 years or something. So you can look this up. You'll find this on the internet in like 5 seconds, and I just don't want to look it up. But there are authors whose works have entered the public domain, and they're guys who were like writers in the 1800s. Go to Amazon Kindle and go look for free books. And any book that's free, it's because the author's works are in the public domain, the copyright's expired. And there are tons of them, by the way. And they're literally like Charles Dickens and Shakespeare. All that stuff is free. So I don't remember the number, but the answer is things do enter the public domain after a certain point of time. And I remember there was a case about Dracula Halloween masks, and Bela Lugosi's estate was suing the manufacturer, saying that it wasn't just Dracula, it was actually Bela Lugosi as Dracula, and they won, and he was already dead, and that's the only reason I even knew the rule. The copyright of computer programs, 50 years after the first copies were made available to the public.
There you go.
So I had the first one right, and it's 50 years after they were licensed. The answer on Atari, in 5 years. Pong is in the public domain in 5 years. Isn't that awesome? Last question from Patreon from Delta Prime. I made a bunch of money a few years ago by buying Take-Two stock after GTA 4's announcement, then selling it when the incredible day one sales numbers were announced for GTA 4, which pushed the stock up over 75%. Are these kind of gains still possible you had in the market, or have traders wised up to the huge day one sales announcements for major franchises? Yes, they're still available. All the publishers are up at all-time highs right now. I mean, I think Activision hit 65 or 6 and has probably pulled back to 62. EA hit 120 or 121. It's down to like 112 or 13. Take-Two hit 118 maybe, and it's like 110-ish. So they're all like up a ton. But to be honest with you, Take-Two was, when GTA 5 launched in 13, the stock was under 20. It was probably 16, and it's 116 now, so it's gone up 100 points since. And in fairness, look, if you guys had told me in 2013 GTA 5 is going to sell 85 million copies, I would have said you're on drugs. I would have bet anything. I would have bet my house against your dollar that it wouldn't sell 85 million copies. So, and the reason I say that is, the best-selling game, as far as I'm aware, of all time was maybe 40, which is one of the Mario games. So, this is crazy. I mean, this game is like the movie Avatar was. Just like everybody saw it, and it did $2 billion in box office. It's just a once-in-a-lifetime weird thing, and maybe that'll happen again. But, so Take-Two's up like crazy because they made the best-selling game of all time by 2x. And now Red Dead's coming out. So people just assume that that's going to happen forever. So sure, you can still make money on a relative basis. Ubisoft has gone from 13 to 60 something. EA's gone from 13 to 113. Take-Two's gone from 16 to 116. Activision's gone from 11 or 12, 13 when they bought back Blizzard in mid 2013 to 60 something. So, are they all going to go up 75% more on their next big game? Probably not. But what happens when games go off console? What happens when you can sell a game to anybody who's got a CPU and a GPU in a device somewhere that connects to a TV? Because that day is now. That's coming. And so you're going to see game sales double, triple, quadruple over a very short period of time. And when that happens, I think the publishers all work. So the answer is yes, you can still make big money in the sector. Yes, you might get it on huge day one sales. Problem is, it's not going to be Call of Duty because we know Call of Duty sells well. It's not going to be GTA because now we expect 85 million for the next one. So it's got to be some new IP that we haven't, we really don't know is going to be that great. And yes, I think there's always an opportunity. Thanks for joining us on Pachter Factor. I'm hopeful you're watching on SIFTD.net and you're a Patreon subscriber. If not, and you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate your patronage. The least you can do is follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter, please, because I need some more followers. And as long as you keep it civil, I will respond to any questions I get on Twitter. So thanks again for joining us. But again, we appreciate if you can support Shane and keep these things being made, because otherwise it'll die. I won't do it by myself. See you guys next week. I once had an argument with Mike Morheim about whether a winged horse in World of Warcraft was considered a cosmetic item, because I said it saves you time. And we got into a discussion about why don't you save people time by letting them earn weapons or level ups, faster. And he's like, no, that would be pay to win. We cannot do that. But he didn't think that a flying horse in World of Warcraft was pay to win, even though it saved you the trudging through whatever. But I respect the guy. What I'm saying is it's a slippery slope. Once you have the winged horse, you start letting people level up by paying money, then you're obviously letting them pay to win.